Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Thursday, January 14th, 2021, and today we're going to be taking a look at the 2022 Senate elections map and talking about how the Democratic Party can actually expand their very, very narrow majority that will take into effect when President-elect Joe Biden is sworn in just under a week. So the Democratic Party doesn't exactly start out with the advantage on this map. We're actually going to go ahead and characterize all of the states based off how they are in terms of which respective parties hold certain states. The Democrats are in the majority, as I mentioned. They have 50 seats, but it looks as if in this upcoming election, they are trying to at least win over more voters than they did in the past and trying to win back some of these Senate seats that were Democratic seats for very long times. And looking at some of the more competitive races, the Democratic Party is definitely targeting major states that were won by the president, referring to Donald Trump, back in 2020 and 2016, on top of states that Joe Biden was able to flip back in the 2020 presidential election, whether it was decades coming or just a four-year flip. Joe Biden was able to switch back over 5 states, and I believe 5 states and 1 congressional district, being Nebraska's 2nd district, but there is no Senate election in Nebraska. But out of those 5 states that were flipped, there is actually a Senate election in 4 out of the 5. So currently there are 2 Republicans there, 2 Democrats. It looks as if the Democratic Party is going to try to make that 4 Democrats based off their 2020 election result. But we actually need to go a little bit further than the 2020 election to look at 2022. There are very obvious pathways for the Democratic Party to expand their majority, but the question is whether or not they are able to win them over, considering that there are retiring incumbents in Pennsylvania and North Carolina, traditionally competitive states. The Democratic Party looks to field very competitive candidates and very strong candidates, because that is something that they didn't necessarily lack. They just underestimated the strong support for the GOP candidates in a number of these races. You know, Tom Tillis, Susan Collins, a lot of these competitive races in this election, well, they were won by the Republican Party. Why? Because the Democratic Party, yes, they had very strong candidates all around. I do think that they have very strong candidates. Maybe they had some faults with Cal Cunningham, but initially, he was a very strong candidate entering into the election before the whole scandal erupted. But, I would say arguably, a number of these Democrats that were running in 2020 were very strong. It's just the Democratic Party really underestimated how much support these Republicans had as a result of Donald Trump being on the ballot. But this will be the first election where Donald Trump is either not on the ballot or won't be president of the United States. And actually, the last time that this Senate race was up, Donald Trump was also on the ballot. So looking at the 2016 results, 2018 and 2020 results, which I will show you, Donald Trump in one way or another was on the ballot, whether that was in terms of representation from the Republican Party or whether that was just a fact that he was at the top of the ticket. We will not have that type of effect on the entire American electorate where, these people will be directly tied to President Trump, because he is a name that was used on both political sides in order to either inspire voters to go one way or push them away from a certain candidate. But in 2016, the Democratic Party actually gained 2 seats in the United States Senate despite losing the presidential election. So where did they get these seats? Well, they won in Illinois, which was pretty much a given. Illinois is a very solid Democratic state. There was a fluke election in which Mark Kirk was able to win here, but Tammy Duckworth defeated him by 15 points. In New Hampshire, however, this one was kind of surprising. Maggie Hassan won by just under, 0.1%, a difference of 1,000 votes. The presidential race was decided by 2,000 votes, so it was extremely narrow in this New Hampshire Senate election, ultimately handed the election to Maggie Hassan, who's up in 2022. But that's not exactly the prime target for the GOP. I mean, if Chris Sununu does decide to run, it probably will be. But there are other areas where the GOP definitely thinks they have a better chance at winning. So looking at these results, the Democratic Party probably looks at this Senate map and doesn't exactly think they have a super easy pathway to victory. Based off 2016, it was very difficult to see how the Democrats could actually win back the Senate without Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. But these incumbent Republican senators didn't exactly win Wisconsin and Pennsylvania by 2 deafening margins. Part of the reason why Hillary Clinton did why Democrats didn't do too well in the Senate elections. I mean, Hillary Clinton didn't do too well, but it was a result of her. Many people expected that Hillary Clinton was going to win the presidency, and as a result voted for Republicans down ballot in order to check that. In 2018, yes, it was a quote-unquote wave year, especially in the United States House of Representatives, but there wasn't that issue. There needed to be a check on the president in order for there to be a check and balances system that actually works. And in 2020, We actually saw this occur in a number of states. Exit polling data indicates that while Joe Biden may have received more support in certain states, many people were expecting him to do well, which is why there are a number of Biden districts with Republicans, the same way there were Clinton districts with Republican incumbents following the 2016 election. So that happens, and, entering into 2022, those Republicans are going to be targets number one for the Democratic Party. Why? Well, they know that if Biden was able to win there, this is not a conservative district. Or if it was a conservative district, what can the Democrats do in order to appeal to those same voters that crossed over party lines to vote for Joe Biden? But looking at the Senate election results, it's very clear as to why the Republican Party was able to win in so many of these key Senate races. Well, the Republican support was underestimated because Donald Trump was included in each individual poll. So when Donald Trump is usually either on the ballot or on the polling data itself, it generally needs to skew to the right, because what we've seen is that there is a portion of the electorate that feels in a way embarrassed to say that they are supporting President Trump or voting for President Trump. And now that he's going to be out, polling data is going to be a lot more accurate, or at least we hope, because in 2018, it was nearly spot on. It was nearly perfect. The House prediction was within 1 to 2 seats. This time it was off by 20 to 30 seats, depending on what you're looking at. If you go to the upper end, it was off by nearly 30 seats in terms of the upward expectation for the Democratic Party. At the best case for statistical models, based off of that 80% of scenarios, it was off by 10 seats in favor of the GOP. So the worst case scenario based off the model was that the Democratic Party was going to lose the House. But the most realistic worst case based off the model was that the Democratic Party was going to actually gain seats. So it was a very weird scenario, but looking at the election results, a lot of it actually skewed to the right because Donald Trump was on the ballot. But now we are getting an election where Donald Trump won't be on the ballot, which is why I think it'll be easier for Democrats to do well in states such as Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, because if 2022 doesn't end up being this Republican wave year like we would expect, we could see similar margins in states such as Pennsylvania. I mean, look at this margin. Bob Casey defeated Lou Barletta by 13 percentage points. In neighboring Wisconsin, we can actually just scroll over here, thankfully. Tammy Baldwin defeated Leah Vukmir by 11%. This is huge. These are not, narrow margins. These are not competitive Senate races. These are absolutely obliterating margins for the Democratic Party. And Tina Smith, someone who was appointed to be the senator in this special election, won by 11 points, practically 11 points in the Minnesota special election. In 2020, she was up for re-election. Her approval rating did not change. It was just the fact that the state got more conservative because Donald Trump was on the ballot. I mean, you can see here, there isn't a super big difference in terms of the margins on the county map. Maybe there's a few more Democratic districts. But Tina Smith, she was able to do well in 2018. But in 2020, there was that really huge effect of voters who moved away from the Democratic Party, and many of which responded in exit polling data telling us and telling the pollsters and telling the pundits that they voted for Republicans because they believed Joe Biden was going to win the election. And that's a narrative that the Democratic Party really tried to steer away from, because when that happened in 2016, the Democrats were super confident they were going to win the Senate, win the presidency. They got neither. In 2020, they did not want a repeat of that. They did get the Senate, they did get the presidency, but some of these races were much closer than expected. New Mexico, which has nothing to do with what we're talking about for 2022, was also much closer than expected. It was narrower than a number of other races, which I find very surprising. But what we saw was there was a portion of the electorate that expected Joe Biden to be president, and as a result, they voted for Republicans. But after the Republican Party pretty much did not accept the election results, Donald Trump and the Republicans paid the price for it in these Georgia runoff elections. And the reason why I'm talking about how the Democrats can expand their majority is because they already did it in Georgia. They already used energy against an outgoing president. Usually, that doesn't work. It never really works. The first elections under President Trump were huge elections for the Democratic Party because they were the first time that they could actually narrow traditionally conservative districts. It happened, and they were able to do so, and they were able to win one race with Conor Lamb, but they lost a number of others, but they were moral victories, and they amounted to the Democratic Party winning back the House of Representatives in 2018. And we could have seen that for the GOP, where Georgia could have been the first repudiation of a President-elect Biden, of a President Biden, a check on the Democratic-controlled presidency, but that simply did not happen. It didn't happen in Georgia, and the Democratic Party won both Senate seats, and as a result, the Democrats now control one of the Georgia Senate seats through 2026, so that one won't even be in contention in 2022. But if the Democrats just want to maintain the majority, of course all they have to do is win the same number of seats that they currently hold. But if we're talking about expansion, well, since Donald Trump won't be on the ballot, I think it'll be much easier for the Democratic Party to do well in Wisconsin, to do well in Pennsylvania, states that have Republican incumbents. If you're looking at the margins in 2016, they're by no means comparable to the Democratic margins in 2018. And if this election doesn't actually end up being a wave election 2022, when I say this election, 2022 is what I'm referring to. If it doesn't end up actually being a red wave year where the Democratic Party could actually do well, they could win over just the same amount of votes that Joe Biden did and end up winning 2 Senate seats. Pat Toomey, someone who narrowly won against Katie McGinty in this state, he's retiring. So there will no longer be that factor of the incumbency. That could be enough, just to shift this state to the left. In fact, the lieutenant governor there, John Fetterman, he is a very popular figure in the state. He's a well-known figure. I think he would have no problem in a primary. And, he's pretty much all but announced that he's going to be running for Senate. He's raised a lot of money, over $500,000 already in the state of Pennsylvania, which is a pretty large sum of money after an election that was just one of the most expensive election in history, and also the most expensive Senate elections in history and most expensive House elections in history. But looking at the Pennsylvania and Wisconsin election results in 2016, I don't think the Republican Party should be too confident about maintaining it in 2022. On top of that, North Carolina is also going to be a competitive state. Richard Burr won by around 6 points, which is very strong. I would say that's a pretty good margin to victory, but keep in mind that Donald Trump also won the state by nearly 4 points in 2016. In 2020, well, we can actually take a look at the margin here. It shifted to the left. If you look at the shift from 2016, you will notice that there are areas in North Carolina that shifted to the left, sometimes by very large amounts, 10 points with a lot of votes in that county. And if you're looking at the margin of victory for President Trump, well, it's by no means nearly 4 points. This is 1.3%. The margin narrowed down significantly. And if the Senate elections tell us anything, North Carolina isn't too kind to a number of their incumbents. Thom Tillis narrowly won. He narrowly won against Cal Cunningham. It was by roughly the same margin that Donald Trump defeated Joe Biden on the ballot. But if you look at the House results in the state of North Carolina, had the Democrats just ran a candidate in the 3rd congressional district before it was redistricted due to gerrymandering, the Democratic Party would have won the popular vote in the state of North Carolina. Even without running a candidate in a district with tens of thousands of people, the Democratic Party came within less than a percentage point of winning the popular vote in North Carolina. So the off-year election actually benefited the Democratic Party when Donald Trump simply wasn't on the ballot. And I get it. It was a Democratic wave year, and I believe that. But if 2022 doesn't end up being a Republican wave year, if the Democrats can actually avoid a fiasco the way that they had this time with Cal Cunningham, then maybe North Carolina could help the Democratic Party reach a majority of 53 seats in the Senate. This is not a prediction. This is not me saying that this is going to happen. But if we're talking about a way for the Democratic Party to expand their majority, I would say the 3 easiest states, if any, would be Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina. These are states that are traditionally competitive. These are states that are going to have 2 outgoing Republicans in Pennsylvania and North Carolina, so it'll be an open race there. We haven't heard from Ron Johnson as to whether or not he is going to run for re-election. He initially indicated that he was not going to. He has since changed his mind. He had pretty much said in 2019 that he was not going to run for re-election, and then walked it back and said anything is possible looking at a 3rd term. But the Democratic Party is still going to heavily target it because they won this state on the presidential level. They know the Democratic votes are there. The question is whether or not they can tap into it and whether or not these voters in the midterm election actually want to continue electing more Democrats the same way they did in 2020. But the Republican Party can tell you that Senate elections in opposition wave years aren't exactly the worst thing ever. The Republican Party was able to gain 2 seats, even in the hotly contested state of Florida, which was decided by just 0.2%. So it was actually very narrow in the state of Florida, but still a Republican victory regardless. The Republicans also picked up Missouri, Indiana, and North Dakota. The Democrats counteracted that by picking up Nevada. They picked up the state of Arizona, but not super easily. These were states, North Dakota, Indiana, Missouri, and Florida. These are states that the Democratic Party really wanted to either maintain. Actually, all 4 of these are pickups, so maintain and possibly, win in Tennessee. Phil Bredesen lost by double digits, but still one of the closest Democrats in quite some time now. They also almost won Texas. I think people forget that. Beto O'Rourke came within 3 points in Texas, much narrower than it was on the presidential margin this time. Ted Cruz didn't even reach 51%. So Beto O'Rourke was defeated by, if we're actually going by raw percentage here, a total of 2.6%. So looking at that margin of victory for Ted Cruz, that's not exactly super secure, but he's not up until 2024. So Ted Cruz will likely face a very large opponent in 2024. It's possible that even Scott Kelley decides to run in the state of Texas. But looking at that margin, it was very, very close in Texas in this election. But the Democrats didn't exactly come as close in Texas this election. Texas also isn't up in 2022, so that's out of the equation. But overall, I would say if the Democratic Party was able to gain seats, to expand the majority, it would go through Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina, because these states have retiring incumbents, possibly another retiring incumbent, and also two of these states were won by Vice President Biden. Now, President-elect Biden and North Carolina is a state that's always competitive, and 2018 was a good year for Democrats. If Democrats can ride the wave of a recovering economy, of vaccine distribution, of conquering a global pandemic, well, it's very possible that Joe Biden is a popular president by the time we reach 2022, or continues to be popular because he's currently approved of by the American people and is in turn able to take what is expected to be a Republican wave year into a Democratic, okay year. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my post-2020 election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.